yo voy a tener necesidad de los slides que están en el computador. ¿Va? No sé cómo se hace esto. Vanderlei, hay el computador, los slides. Y también el control, sí. Esto, muy bien. Bom, entonces, inicialmente quiero agradecer mucho la invitación, Eddie, para la organización de este workshop fascinante, mesmo se eu sou pobrecito físico, físico quântico, además, teórico, pero aprendi muito neste workshop. Agradeço também ao Monsenhor, ao chanceler, por esta oportunidade, a Vanderlei Bagnato por a invitação de vir acá e por ter pago também o avião para mim e os outros brasileiros que estão acá. Então, como devem ter percebido, eu hablo el portuñol, não é el espanhol. Então, para minha apresentação, como os slides estão em inglês, eu vou falar em inglês, pero para a discussão podemos falar em castelhano. Está bem? Muito bem. So I turn to English, and of course I should say that even though I am a theoretical physicist, I think we have many common grounds. First, of course, because this is about science, and science has its own ethics, has its own methodology, even though, as was said, I think yesterday, biology is not physics, has some uncertainties much bigger than Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. We have some common grounds, and I think we have other common grounds. I believe that everybody who is here, because you are here, you think not only about your individual career, but also you care about the region, you care about the development of the region, and that's also common grounds between us. So I'm very happy to be here. What I'm going to do is an introduction to the introduction I prepared before, because I decided to shorten it so that we have more time for discussion. So my aim here is just to tell you about some previous discussions in this region on scientific collaborations that were the object of meetings between scientific societies in the region, some of them coordinated by UNESCO, for instance, preparing for the World Science Forum, others spontaneously took place with meetings between academies of sciences, or within within Yanas, for instance, or Ixo-Rolac or Tuaz-Rolac. So just in few minutes, I'm going to tell you about these discussions. Now let me see if I get this right. Of course not. Cool. Okay. So it's clear that there are big global challenges for science, and this is not related just to Latin America. They are really global challenges, and of course there are also challenges for Latin America. We have challenges involving food security, water supply, energy supply, aging, disease, sanitation, climate change and air pollution, natural disasters. This natural, very frequently I put in quotation marks because many of them are provoked by human beings. Science education, quality education for all, sustainable use of biodiversity, management of huge urban agglomerations that takes almost everything into account, sanitation, transportation, education, energy, food and water supply, and also social inclusion, eradication of poverty, reduction of inequalities. So, you know, it's a big list of problems, and science has to do with all of them. So that's funny. Let's see. Okay. So, furthermore, many of these challenges are related also to some global governance because they affect many, many countries. Climate is one example. High seas is another example, of course, very important. As was mentioned here before, it's It's most of perhaps the Earth's biodiversity you can find in the oceans. Antarctica, space exploration, internet, epidemics, Ebola, Zika, and so forth. So these are problems that really involve global governance in order to take care of them. So big challenges for science. Now, these challenges have motivated the appearance of many institutions, and among them IAP, the Interacademy Partnership. I think I have a better pointer here. Yeah. So Interacademy Partnership. We have ICSU, International Council of Scientific Unions. Twice, it was before the Third World Academy of Sciences. Now there is no Third World because there is no Second World anymore. So it became the World Academy of Sciences. Programs like Future Earth, and of course IANAS, which is the Association of Academy of Sciences for the Americas. Now, I call your attention, okay, thank you very much. I call your attention to some interesting institutions here. Of course, we have UNESCO here, but we have also this Israeli-Palestinian science organization, which means, science for peace. We have books that have been made within the IAP association. So this one is on capacity building. It was the work of a study group co-chaired by Jacob Pallis, who was the previous president of the Brazilian Academy of Science before me, and also Serag Eldin, who was actually one of the directors of the World Bank, and then became director of the Library of Alexandria. So both co-chaired this group here. Then that's another example. It's a book called Lighting the Way on Energy, and the co-chairs there were José Goldenberg, a physicist from the University of São Paulo in Brazil, and Steve Chu, who was Secretary of Energy of Obama and a Nobel laureate. He's a member of this academy here. So many institutions were made with efforts to tackle that list of problems. And if you look at this one here, you see Science for Poverty Eradication and Sustainable Development. This was pioneered by Brazil. Actually, it was a proposal from Brazil, and there is now a committee from IAP dealing with this problem, and Brazil is the chair. Actually, the Brazilian Academy of Science is the chair of this committee. So let's focus on Latin America and Caribbean. We have some big advantages over other regions. We may have the largest sink of carbon from the planet. We have a huge water basins. We have a huge biodiversity. In fact, in Brazil, the evaluation is that we know about 5% only of Brazilian biodiversity, and it's also evaluated that Brazil has 20% of the global biodiversity. And of course, when I talk about the biodiversity of the Amazon region, it is shared by Brazil and other countries. So it's a good occasion actually to collaborate for studying this biodiversity and building, who knows, a biotechnology based on this biodiversity. On the other hand, we do have problems, a strong social inequality, a high vulnerability to natural disasters, a small number of researchers, deficient educational systems, few innovative industries, exports dominated by commodities, which means challenges for us, because at the same time that we have these problems, as it was demonstrated in this workshop, we have science with an excellent level. So we have the human capability to work and to do good science. Now, when I say that we have a small number of researchers, you can see that from this map here. You see the more intense the color, the bigger is the number of researchers per million inhabitants. In 2010, Brazil had about 710 researchers per million inhabitants. Argentina had 50% more. The average of the countries of OCDE is about 3,500 researchers per million inhabitants. And some countries have even 6,000 or even 8,000 researchers per million inhabitants. So again, another challenge. We need more researchers. So we need to form people to attract good students to do research and join their efforts to the efforts we are doing now. Now, the IANAS, Inter-American Network of Academies of Science, was founded in 2004, and there are four main objectives: to assist in the building of national scientific capacities, to cooperate in building capacities of the academies of the region, stimulating new academies to appear in several countries, and that's the third point, to aid in the creation of new academies in those countries, and to influence the scientific decision-making processes in the Americas with the goal of promoting prosperity and equity in the hemisphere. I took that from the program of IANAS. IANAS has now 6 major programs on water management, food security, women for science, science education, energy, and capacity building. Now, these are books that are produced by IANAS. You have their books on water, energy, women in science, climate change, food and nutrition security, and so forth. So you see, IANAS is doing that, actually. So you have working groups, they prepare studies that have proposals for political action, actually, for governments in the region. I think that's quite different from what the Latin American Academy of Sciences could do, because we need something like that to stimulate actual scientific cooperation between countries in the region. And we're going to talk more about that in a while. So, you have IANAS. Now we have also TUAS, the World Academy of Sciences, and that's the regional office for Latin America and Caribbean. It also produces studies like this one. It's a crosstalk of biology with other sciences. Sure. That's a little bit what we had these 2 days, right? We have seen this crosstalk. This was a conference which was held in Rio de Janeiro this year. It was the first international conference of the TUAS Young Affiliates. These are scientists up to 40 years old who go into TUAS for 5 years, and then they leave, and of course they can come back as full members of TUAS afterwards. We had about, 80 to 90 young scientists there. It was really very nice, and I think it was very moving also to see these young people from all countries studying, discussing science, presenting their work, and very motivated, really. The third institution I want to talk about is ICSU, International Council of Scientific Unions, also the regional office, that also produces documents like this one. This one is on biodiversity in Latin America and Caribbean, an evaluation of knowledge and of the possible outreach of investigation and priority areas. But we're still missing a key translator. We talk English, Portuñol, Spanish, but we need a translator from rhetoric into action so that we can convince our politicians to adopt the suggestions of scientific policy that are produced by these documents. And that's, I think, a problem in this region. We have to learn how to do it, how to convince politicians and society in general that this action should be taken. So these several meetings we had in Latin America in the last few years, we got some ideas about inventing a better future. And they include science and technology capacity building as a shared regional and global responsibility, the founding of digital libraries of science and technology with universal access, virtual networks of excellence, linking scientific talents of entire regions and the globe with a multidisciplinary approach. We had some very good examples of that. And of course, even today, with Vanderlei Pagnato talk, that was an example of that. Education beyond the school, reformulation of structure and programs of higher education towards more interaction between disciplines, and funding mechanisms that should be strengthened for support of science and technology in developing nations. Now, when I mention that, I'm thinking about examples of other regions, say Europe, for instance. They have, big programs for Europe as a whole that finances research groups. It stimulates interaction between several countries. So why not think about this in Latin America? I'm just saying that as a provocation, so that we can discuss and think about that later on. Now, so let me just give you an example of a big challenge for the region, and that concerns the Amazon region, which, as the map on the left shows, several countries have boundaries with that region. There is a book which was produced by the Brazilian Academy of Science on the Amazon that was some years ago, I think 2008, with proposals for public policy on the region, and the proposals going in the direction of having a sustainable development in the region through the exploration of the biodiversity, that is, keeping the forest and profiting from the biodiversity there. We are going to have a symposium on biodiversity in June of 2018. That's a result of a collaboration between the Brazilian and the French Academies of Science, because, of course, in the French Guiana, you have researchers that do work on the Amazon biodiversity. But we are going to invite to this meeting people, scientists from all these regions, okay, so that we can talk about this biodiversity. And I cannot avoid give you some example of the wealth in this region. Since I'm a physicist, perhaps, I may have this problem that this example is already very well known to you biologists, but for me it was a surprise. I was in Amazon, I was there in Manaus about, 3 weeks ago, something like that, and then they told me about a substance called burgeonin. So, I did my homework. I went to the internet and I started to look for burgeonin, what kind of thing is that? So, and then I found out some interesting things. You see, burgeonin is a substance that comes from this plant here, which is called Endopleura ushi. Ushi is, in the Indian language, yellow. So you have this yellow fruit that comes from this plant, and from this fruit, you extract this substance here, burgeonin, which has this chemical formula here. And I found out that this substance is being sold in Brazil by the Merck labs, purified to more than 95%, at the price of 1,000 reais the milligram. 1,000 reais is about $300 the milligram. Then, I was curious, so I went to the internet and looked for the price of gold. Now, how much they're paying for gold. And I found out they're paying for gold 130 reais the gram. Now, that's about $40 the gram. Now, compare, $300 a milligram with $40 a gram is a factor of 10 to the fourth. So, why gold? Why not biodiversity? Okay, so, of course, gold is needed for civilization, but, in some quantity. But, so I was very impressed by that, and of course, that's just one example. There are many more. Pink wood, for instance, is the basis for Chanel No. 5. Charming, right? It's there in the Amazon. So there is really a wealth there, and we are trying to convince the Brazilian government that we should have a big program on biotechnology based on biodiversity. I even make an image which it seems that, at least that the politicians start to understand. I tell them about the Apollo program in the United States. You remember that? There was this Sputnik satellite that Soviet Union launched in space. So the United States went into panic. Come on, we are going to lose this spatial project. So they decided to make a big project. They changed basic education. They changed the profile of industry in the United States, and they put a man in the moon. So the question is then, what is the Apollo project? What would be an Apollo project for Brazil? And maybe we should also think, what would be an Apollo project for Latin America? And in Brazil, I'm saying this will be an Apollo project for Brazil. Exploring the biodiversity, sustainable development of the Amazon region, which is the best way to protect the forest. It's not with armies, not with police, it's by offering a more profitable option than just destroying the forest. So that's the idea. And I would like to finish with this slide. See, Eddie, 15 minutes, like you told me, okay? So, no, maybe a little bit more, because start with 35. Well, anyway. So in this book, they say something interesting, and we should keep that in mind, because up to now, I have told you about possible applications of science, the big challenges for science involving energy, climate change, biodiversity, and so forth. But we should remember that science is not only itself a culture of global dimensions. It induces, as it's written there, a cultural current that strongly and positively affects societies in which it flourishes, including those that at first were racked by poverty and hunger, riven by civil strife, and embedded in fiscal crisis. The culture of science and the open, honest values that it engenders are enormously important above and beyond the material benefits that they help produce for human welfare. And I think it's very important to keep that in mind in times when we suffer strong pressures to have applications tomorrow, when we know very well that this attitude towards science also leads to applications, but maybe not tomorrow, maybe in 10 years from now. And these applications can actually change radically our lives, our ways and costumes. So that's what I wanted to tell you, and I think, you know, after Bifano tells you about the Latin American Academy of Sciences, we could just exchange ideas about how to improve scientific collaboration in Latin America. Thank you very much.
Muy bien.